Okay, we're back. Wait, now we're back. All right. So, uh, can't forget, very important, Chick-fil-A shake. Can't let it go bad. Paulina and I had our COVID tests because we are going to Hawaii this weekend, and I got a COVID test for the first time today. I'm not going to talk much more about it because I don't want the stream to be throttled, but wasn't as intense as I was expecting. I was expecting like to have to put something like way up your nose, and that's not what I had to do. It's just like barely in your nostril, but I still have avoided it till now. But can't avoid it forever. Was negative. Obviously. I mean, not obviously, but otherwise I wouldn't be going to Hawaii anymore. Okay, so today I wanted to discuss quickly because I do have a lot to do. But so this isn't going to be a very long stream, but I don't think, you never know. But I do want to talk about a very important topic, and one that we'll touch on again, and that is terminology. We are faced with a serious problem in that every single theory of everything that is out there or close to, every meta theory, every theory beyond the standard model, every theory that has the intention of explaining the standard model or explaining space-time, is unique, and because of this, it has been required that the creators make up a new set of terminology for all the structures in their model. And I am faced with an issue because I'm writing my paper right now. My goal, by the way, is to get it done by January, beginning of January, very beginning. So like by the end of the year. My goal is to share the full paper. I've really got a lot done, and I've got a really good outline. It's what I'm going to work on a bit after this. And I think I've got the abstract to a point where I can like leave it alone for a while. It was very important to be a perfectionist on it though, because it's the abstract. It's the most important part of the paper. And so I'm faced with this issue though because I want to give everyone credit for terms that I think are great terms. So I want Eric Weinstein's Observerse to be a part of this if it is what I think it is. I'm still debating on whether or not Aeon is a good term to use, but considering it, I think it's a good term. I just think there might be better terms, but it might be the best term because those I guess you could say linguistically better terms are actually less adopted already, so it might be better to just use Aeon. But the issue is that if I use the term Aeon and I use the term Observerse and I use the term, and obviously there will be disclaimers throughout anything that I post when I'm using someone else's term. Aeon really isn't Penrose's term, but where he uses it is specific, and it's also though consistent with its previous use. And but Observerse is a Eric Weinstein term for something specific, and conscious agent is a theory is a term created by Donald Hoffman. Sentient Singularity is a term created by me. There's just a bunch of them. Cosmological verse. I tried to make it Cosmoverse, potentially, to replace Aeon, and I saw somebody else had already made created this word, but that doesn't, I don't think it's in It's related to something else that's I think based on what I saw online. I just saw that somebody else had already thought of it, um, which is fine. We can use it. Like the point is to use words that make sense, or else none of this is going to work. You have to use but we have to give everybody their due, which means, uh, Kurt Jaimungal had created a term specifically for the next generation of science. Maybe that's a term that gets incorporated into this next phase of human understanding, the meta, the meta science, I guess, which is metaphysics. And there's, there's just a bunch of them. Thought periodicity, stages of sentience. I'm trying to think of any others. The four primary perspectives. There's a lot. And what's some Chris Langan ones? Telesis. Like these are words that should be incorporated into this. All of these theories are very good, and the best parts of each of them should always be carried forward. And we have to start saying, okay, we're going to use your word, this word that you came up with, 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 or else we're never going to go anywhere. Because right now what it is it's a bunch of people competing to try and get all their terms adopted. But to get all their terms adopted is to disregard everyone else. And the issue is that when you look over at that guy, he's clearly onto something. And you look over at that guy, and he's clearly onto something. So why would we take that person? And like I said yesterday, which was a great stream, I highly suggest that you watch it. It's not, we shouldn't be judging these based on which one is correct and which one isn't. They're all largely correct and all also have faults or have mistakes. But what we should be looking at is, where does the theory stop? Okay, like for constructor theory, where does it that's the theory of constructors, which is not, it doesn't go to users, which, it explains that there is a user of a constructor in constructor theory, but a user is a conscious being. But constructor theory is not the theory of the users of the constructors, it's the theory of the constructor. So it stops there, but it doesn't go above to conscious agent. We need to look at things like that, but we have to start taking people's terms. And there's two issues with this. One, it means that we all have to start using terms that someone else came up with, and that puts you at risk of misusing their terms. And I've been very careful to put disclaimers always of like, I'm pretty sure this is what Eric Weinstein means by observers. If it's not, then he can tell me and I'll change the term. But so we have to allow for that constantly. But there also has to be a dialogue so that we know that we're using the terms correctly as we bring them forward. If we don't, that's not good. Because that doesn't really do the other person's work justice, just because you use their term if you misinterpreted it. But then what's the point of using that term? So the other issue is that other than misinterpretation, is basically just that egos are involved in this, and that nobody so far wants that to be the case. You just see it's like Wolfram versus Weinstein versus Tegmark versus Lisi. None of these people is mostly wrong, and none of them are all right. So why are we doing this versus nonsense? I really think that we have to treat this totally different than it's not general relativity. It's not Darwinian evolution, which is really just adaptation, which is only half of evolution, according to Sentient Singularity Theory. We have to start treating this differently. We have to start forming a community around this, which is great to see this year, because Kurt and Brian Keating have really started this. And you have to give credit, honestly, to Eric Weinstein for this as well, because, I mean, there's lots of people you have to give credit to, but Eric Weinstein really brought this conversation to the magnitude that it is at now. And then Kurt obviously is amalgamated probably more information in a single location on theories of everything than anyone else has ever done before. And with a degree of rigor that's just also never been done before. Because it takes so much work to look into people's theories, because everybody's using their own terms, because it's literally the invention of a new field, but it's not even a new field, it's a meta field. It's different in structure than just, oh, this is, we had biology, now we have, something else. This metaphysicology, something over here. That's not the way that it's going to work. It's just that there is this meta field that is responsible for the creation of all the other fields. And you can apply it to every single field. So I think that it's going to be more like that in how we do it, just because it seems that that's the inevitable structure of how this is, because it is different. The other way it could go is we need a new word that is not science, which is like Kurt's word. And I don't know how much we're going to be willing to give up the word science, but we might just not give it up, but just create another one that's in addition to, because you need to start. People say science doesn't, it asks how, but it doesn't ask why. And that's not true of this space. The why is essential. It's just as essential as the how. It's just as, it might be more essential, actually. I think it is more essential than the how. The why in this. And that's the who. These are questions that are not very important to science right now, but they either have to be made important in this, in this meta field, or we have to make a new word that is not science, that is in addition to science. So there's lots of problems that we have to overcome. And I basically realized that the institutions are not a hurdle anymore, I don't think. My very first video on this channel was over escaping our academic institutions. And that, I knew it was about how COVID was going to destroy the institutional authority, the authority of the institutions that we currently have. And I'm pretty sure that that is definitely happening. And I see new institutions being formed financially, the very beginnings of them, and scientifically, the very beginnings of them, educationally, very beginnings. So I think that all these previous institutions and structures are going to fall. They're going to kick and scream the whole way down. So, be prepared. But they're not a hurdle anymore. They were, but they're not anymore. They were a wall. They were a brick wall in the way of progress. They're falling like dominoes at this point. That's a good thing. I think. That doesn't mean it doesn't have its own unique issues that come with it. But this space specifically, though, that is going to be opened up because of this meta field, poses very unique challenges, especially when it comes to terminology, because language is everything. I didn't make progress on sentient singularity theory in my ability to translate it. I could apply it in subjective situations, in regards to moral discussions and political discussions, in ways that were extremely effective, but I couldn't explain why I had come to that conclusion. And that all changed when I came up with the four primary perspectives, which are inside, outside, separate, and oneness, which is what geometric unity calls X4, and what is the tetrahedron, essentially in emergence theory. And there's also a quadratic structure in constructor theory. So it's everywhere, but only sentient singularity theory seems to have these terms defined. It's not just X4. It's not just a four-dimensional manifold. It's just that each one of these perspectives in this manifold, essentially, or these aspects of this manifold, essentially, which is a sentient singularity, has a description, has a label that is describing to some degree, and then also a description of the label that relates it to the others. So, here. So oneness is outside and inside of separateness. So outside and inside of separateness. Outside is separate from oneness. Inside is separate and oneness. Separate is inside or outside of oneness. So basically, each one is defined by the others, which is why they are entangled. They are dependent. Every single one here is dependent. This is what allowed me to make progress with sentient singularity theory. That's why it's so important that our terminology is good, because it will be the defining factor in whether or not we can start to make more progress. So where is this? Looking for something. Okay. It's what allowed me to do this basically next, and then everything else that comes from that. So it's very important. Language is essential. I've said before, I had this debate once that I'll never forget. It was with Michael Knowles from the Daily Wire, and we were like smoking cigars at 2 a.m. We got into this heated debate about whether or not language was primary, or whether or not there was something primary to language other than the speaker or the communicator, essentially. And I had said that you can understand things basically geometrically prior to having a linguistic description of them. And I still stand by this, but I didn't quite understand at the time how important the language was, because it basically makes it so that you have this vague idea in your head that might be defined enough, but not very specific. It's vague, at least in comparison to what it would be if you had a linguistic description of it. And then once you add a linguistic description, now you can, not only is it defined and specific and no longer vague because it can't move, because you've defined it, you've put it at a certain point instead of a general area. It's just a point. And you've also made it such that it can now be communicated. And that makes it useful to more than just you. I mean, this idea that I had in my head was useful to me philosophically prior to really doing this work as a as a targeted and intentional, action, basically. And but it wasn't really that useful in that I couldn't communicate the general idea. I could communicate specific, you know, revelations from it, or specific lessons or specific perspectives, but I couldn't communicate the idea that was giving rise to the specific perspectives, which means you can't, others can't take it, can't use it, really. I mean, they have to rely on you to contextualize a lesson from it, and that is extremely limited in comparison. So right now we're having the same thing where, the CTMU allows for Chris Langan to do make incredible deductions. Sentient Singularity Theory allows me to do it. Conscious Agent Theory allows Donald Hoffman to do it. Geometric Unity allows Eric Weinstein to do it. All of this is obvious. Bernardo Kastrup's perspective on the world allows him to do it. Tom Campbell's My Big Toe allows him to do it. But we need not just now that everybody's got their ideas basically down. I haven't released the paper completely yet, but I have hundreds, if not even potentially over 1,000 hours of, maybe even thousands of hours of content at this point discussing this. So it's not like it's not been put out there. But it's still specific. It's specific to a specific following, those people that follow the work, that know the terms. And I realized this because I showed my abstract, which I think is, pretty specific and obvious and dialed down. I showed my abstract to my dad, and my dad isn't like a physics person, but he knows more than most people about physics, but he's not really in the physics world in any way. He just knows what he's heard, Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about, which is a lot, but it's not like this. And he read it, and I asked him, can you give me a basic, like one sentence, one or two sentences describing what I'm saying in this abstract? And he couldn't. And I asked him why. Like, what are you getting hung up on? And he said basically, when he thinks of singularity, he thinks of black holes and like a singularity at the center of a black hole. He's not thinking about it as a singularity as in, it's this infinitely, I don't want to say small, but it's like this infinite oneness structure that is a point, and it's beyond size. That's really what it is. It's not small because it's beyond size. It's endless, and it's also a singular. So that's what that's what a singularity is. And it's found at the center of black holes, supposedly, and it's also the term used for the emergence of a general artificial intelligence, and that's also called the singularity, or when AI gets superhuman, which that whole like scale is stupid, but it's at the point in which a generally intelligent a general technological intelligence emerges, which would really be sentient technological being. Like at the moment that happens, that's singularity. So at the big start of the universe, that's a singularity. So this is not a word that he uses constantly in different areas, where he thinks about it as this this idea that can be applied in multiple instances. To him, it's just like center of a black hole. And I know he's heard of it used in terms of AI, but he doesn't think about that when it comes to physics. So if I show him something that he thinks is basically physics, he's not thinking about AI. He's thinking about, even though it's directly part of this, he's thinking about just like black holes, and that's physics and general relativity and uh, quantum entanglement. He's not thinking about artificial intelligence and humanity and technology. So this is the obstacle, is that a lot of these terms that are actually pretty solid, even those convey different things to different people. And that's something you just kind of have to accept, because think about general relativity. Most people, when you say what is general relativity, they'll say, oh, Einstein's theory of basically gravity and space-time. And that's not false, but they don't really know what that means. They'll be like, oh yeah, it's like curves, space-time, like heavy things. And so, and that's not wrong, but it's not really like an understanding. This is going to be exactly the same with every single set of terms. So if whatever this next label we come up with for the meta theory and all the labels contained within, they will probably be pretty similar. But when we say the universe, people generally know what we're talking about. But even then, you'll get into arguments. Is it a universe? And then is a multiverse multiple universes? Or is the universe the summation of all of the verses in the multiverse? I mean, it's like, you have to get into that kind of thing. But we haven't done that yet, because nobody actually has any real credibility yet about what is beyond what we call the observable universe. And this meta field is going to change that. So we will actually then define, what is the universe? Is it the summation of all of the verses or aeons in the multiverse chain? Or is it, each link in the multiverse chain? And the omniverse would be the summation of all of the verses in the multiverse chain. What about the summation of the sentient sovereign creator of the multiverse chain? And along with, the multiverse chain. What is that? Existence, obviously, but do we have another word for that other than God or existence or the all? So this is stuff that hasn't been incredibly defined, or if it has, it's been defined in specific communities because we don't yet have the framework that's perceived to be basically like inevitable or applicable and kind of not testable, but kind of testable. Like, we haven't moved forward. We're sitting there still arguing whether or not the universe is a bubble in a bubble bath, or whether or not it is, I don't know, a simulation on an alien computer, a Game Boy or something. Like, we're still arguing over that. We have to narrow down what it is in order to actually start thinking about these things more and seriously. It doesn't matter what an omniverse is versus a universe when you don't even know if there's multiple universes, or whether or not there is a multiverse. I guess that's a better way of putting it. So the terms occur when the time is right, because they occur when they are needed. Right now, we don't really need these terms that haven't been defined, but we're about to. And if we're going to kick off this field, you have to start talking to each other and accepting each other's terms instead of just being these competing egos. It's not like general relativity, where nobody's going to be the next Einstein, I don't think. Because there isn't a next Einstein. There's just Einstein. And then there's, work that's done beyond Einstein. There isn't going to be one person that single-handedly discovers the theory of everything yes, we have to decide on terms, and obviously I have my own opinions and thoughts on it that I am discuss on here all the time. But just because a term is adopted doesn't mean it's the same, because general relativity is still stuck in subjectivity, which means it's much more finite in a way. So even though it's that you're getting like this is a much more discretized uh, structure that we're looking at versus a smooth structure, but still, it's what we're trying to do here is something that is to perceive the pattern that is perceivable everywhere, or to map the pattern that is perceivable everywhere and explain why it's there. That's the goal. That's different than just coming up with an equation that explains, you know, relativity essentially. So it's different. It's not an equation. It's a set of models, basically, that are of objective structures, which are the structures of mind. They're the structures that allow the mind to do information processing beyond calculation. So it's not even calculative. It's relational. So last night I actually was writing some things down, and what did I write? I said there's two types of structures, basically, in the stages of sentience, which this will be probably applicable also in how to understand the structures that we're looking at. And obviously, we got into it a bit yesterday with structures like this. So when we're looking at like prioritization, interpretation, differentiation, consideration, proclamation, action, perception, decision, creation, communication, like cognition, all of these structures are help kind of show what needs to be done in a mind, and therefore can help you define and to understand the other structures that now need to be built. So basically, there are, if you look at, what's another good one? Where's the stages of sentience? Let's go here. Models. Okay, here's the stages of sentience. You have atom, cell, family, technology. Then you have hadron, molecule, organism, caste. So basically, these four are relational structures, because a proton is defined by its relationship basically with its value comes from its relationship with a neutron, and vice versa. Molecules' value comes from their relationship with each other, forming more complicated structures like, the double helix, and proteins and all kinds of things. So organisms, their relationship, their value comes from their relationship with each other too. Is this predator? Is this prey? Is this mate? Is this I don't know, like friend? This is all relational. Castes are the same way. There's 6 castes according to Sentient Singularity Theory. That rubs people the wrong way, but those castes are not castes that you're doomed to stay in. You can change between the castes at will, but the castes never change, and they are not on here actually, but yeah, they are. They're over here. So you have like king slash president, priest slash scientist, lords and elected officials, artists slash craftsmen, enforcers slash soldiers, and laborers. And the three that are colored here, black and gray, are government. They are basically the reactive force. And then there's the three white structures, which are the market structures: priests and scientists, artists and craftsmen, laborers. These are not government. So you can change between these. You can be a laborer this year and next year somehow become the president. It's happened multiple times, and not even multiple times, all the time it happens. I have, like, you can be one thing 1 minute and another the next. So if you have a skill making jewelry and that's a side business, but you also work on, at Amazon, fulfilling orders. When you're at Amazon, you're a laborer, and when you're doing your own job, you're an artist or craftsman. So you're not stuck between these, or even in one. You can exist in multiple, but the caste structures are, you can't change them, but you can change you in them, and you can even be kind of almost in all of them. Not at a single moment, but you can throughout your life absolutely be all of these. So, but a laborer is a relationship that is defined in its value by its relationship with it's a structure that is defined in its value by its relationship with other castes like artists and priests or scientists or elected officials and president. So an elected official, its relationship with the president, that like lower elected officials like congressmen, their value is defined, not value like intrinsic value as a person, but their value, meaning what their role is, I guess. Not their value, maybe that's the wrong word. It's not the wrong word, but it will rub people the wrong way. But their role. So it's relational. But then you have cells which replicate, families which replicate, which a family is like a nuclear family, so two parents, children. It's the nuclear family structure. It's the genealogical, replicative structure of an organism. Then there's technology, which is a replicative structure when you realize that it's basically, this is an aeon, and an aeon replicates, and cells replicate, and atoms are, they're also replicative, but because basically they are defined by their so when an atom is formed, the various elements that are formed in a lineage-based environment, basically. It's not exactly the same as a replicating cell, but it is one in which it's not relational, because basically the amount of force that an atom experiences will cause it to change from hydrogen to helium, or to gold, or to platinum, or to every other element that you can think of, calcium. So carbon, all of these atoms are created from hydrogen, and because of that, and they're created successively, essentially. They're built on the previous. You don't go from nothing to calcium. You start with hydrogen and you go forward through the periodic table. And because of that, it's still a lineage, essentially. It's just a little different than directly replicative. It's still a lineage. And these four maneuver in time, and these four maneuver in space, essentially. And time is defined by lineage structures, and space is defined by relationships, relational structures between individuals, essentially. So, whereas time is defined by generations in lineage structures, objectively. It's not seconds or Planck time or anything like that. I'm not saying that doesn't exist. I'm just saying it's what causes the perception of all of that is generationality in lineage structures. And what causes shape to emerge in space is, and structure, is relational entanglement relationships, basically, of individual agents like hadrons and molecules and organisms and casts. So this understanding can help us basically like define what we need as far to model, and then you can pick the terms that are best for it, but they have to be terms that make sense, and they have to be terms that are understandable and are built on other structures. You can't just come in and name it something that makes no sense to anyone in the field. Just because you can't like come in and be like, instead of universe, I'm going to call it Joanne because of my mom. I'm going to name it after my mom. Something like that. My mom's name is not Joanne. But just, for example, I know people name species after family members and stuff like that. You can't just name structures after family members. That doesn't work for consistency and coherence, essentially. So we have our work cut out for us. I don't know what is best. I have plenty of opinions, but time will tell. But also, interaction will tell. Like that's what we ultimately have to do. We have to start interacting and discussing all this. But that means that people's egos have to be set aside, and we have to be okay with saying, okay, you know what? My theory is correct, and this is where is mostly correct, and this is where my specific perspective is going to be especially valuable. But yeah, that theory does go a little bit more fundamentally, a little bit more fundamental than mine. And then you have to step back. So if somebody proposes something more fundamental than sentient singularities, I will step back for sure. I won't argue. I'll still argue that my work is valuable, but I'm not going to. It loses its value if you start saying, no, mine, yours isn't more fundamental than mine, even if it is, and you know it. Like, it will cause even your work to lose value because it will lose context, and context is key. It is the defining aspect of information is context. So the egos, though. I was listening to Max Tegmark and Eric Weinstein again. I haven't listened to that interview in forever, but I was listening to some of it last night, and Eric Weinstein was like talking about you have to be so confident and so arrogant, borderline arrogant, but also truly humble to be involved in this work, at least currently, for sure. And that he was just talking about the egos that are involved in this, and getting people to set those aside is tough. I do think it's probably easier for me to talk about this stuff even because I didn't go to school for 10 years for it. So like I never wanted to be a physicist. This was an accident. So this wasn't like, oh, this has been my life's work, my dream, and if I don't do it, then it's all lost and my life was for nothing. Like, that's not the case at all. Um, I mean, I know that the work is valuable, but if somebody comes up with something that is more fundamental than sentient singularity, I'll give them $100. You heard it here. I mean, I'll give them more than that, but I would definitely at least give them $100. I chose a low number because it was funny, but I mean, I would bet every dime in my bank account easily that, like, you're not going to come up with something more fundamental than sentient singularity. You're just not. Um, so as far as a structure that is, there's many aspects to why that sentient singularity exists, but it must exist for everything else to exist. That's the thing. Even though it is kind of, you're stuck in this, which came first, the chicken or the egg, or in my abstract it says, basically, or on my website it says a consciousness is built of perspectives, built of an awareness of perspectives, and then perspectives are perceived by a consciousness. And so therefore a consciousness and the entangled perspectives that make it up are the creator and creation of each other. So it's a single structure. It's heads and tails of a coin simultaneously, but the heads part of it is what matters the most, because it's basically like saying, what matters more to your being, the fact that you are a human being or the fact that you are a bunch of cells? What matters more, actually, when it comes to describing your being, is that you are a human being. And then you can also say that simultaneously you are an assembly of cells. But we don't call humans cell assemblies. We call them humans. And then we know that they are also simultaneously always assemblies of cells. And this is the same thing as any consciousness. Perspectives are the cells, and the conscious being, or the sentient singularity, is the organism, the human. So this is, like I said, it's the superposition is part of every objective structure, but you still can deduce what is the correct focus given your position. So that's the point. It's not, are humans assemblies of cells or are they organisms? Which one is true? They're both true. Which one do you focus on to define the being best defines the being that is a human being? It's an organism. So where you focus can be deduced as well. And like I said, if anybody comes up with anything more fundamental than a sentient singularity, I'll give them $100. Venmo. Anyways, think that's going to be it for tonight. It was a short stream. Trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to talk about, but there really isn't. I don't think. I'm just double checking. Yeah, no. I have so much to do. So I am looking forward to coming back after my trip to Hawaii. I've never been to Maui. I've never been to Hawaii. This will definitely be pretty awesome. I want to find a sea turtle. We're looking for chameleons. We're looking for sea turtles. Um, what else are we looking for? Day geckos, various fruits. Like I love the just trying varieties of fruits when you go to parts of the world where unique fruits are that aren't just like an apple. And certain parts of the United States have apples that are very good. So, but if you go to the tropics, mangoes are very different than they are in, uh, supermarket. And I've heard the pineapple that people bring pineapple back on the plane. So, like, excited to try that. Um, Not excited for the airplane. I freak out a little bit on planes now. Like internally, I don't like have a panic attack for everybody to see, but I used to not care about being on a plane. I found it very comforting that I had no control over the situation. And then I became a theist, and for some reason, and I don't know if that's the reason, but I see that that's around the time that everything switched. I developed like a little bit of anxiety around flying. Not fear of flying, but a little bit of anxiety. And the last plane I was on, uh, it was just a horrible experience. Which our our pilot, I was working for PragerU at the time, so it was me and Will Witt, and we like were on this plane, and the pilot accidentally went forward instead of backwards at the gate, and crashed into the the gate and got the plane stuck on the gate, so we couldn't even get off. And we were on there for probably like 3 hours, something like that, maybe more, before we got off. And then we had to wait another 2 hours or something like that for another plane. And then we got on the plane. We fly back to California. We're landing at LAX, and we're literally feet from touching down. And I'm like, it's over, finally. And there must have been something on the runway, or parameters were off, and the pilot hits the gas like I've never felt before on a plane, and hopefully never feel again. I mean, these things can move when they lay on the gas, and they just never do. And he slammed on the gas, and right as we were about to touch down, he just boom and just like took off again. And you go right up over the ocean, because it's LAX. And then we had to circle back around again, and he said something about, there was something off, that it was something was outside the normal landing conditions. I don't know what it was, but it was scary, scary as shit. Like, I just remember like looking over at everybody around me, and just everybody was just like, oh my gosh, are we gonna make it? It's freaky. But I mean, and this flies over the water. I'm not somebody with like a super fear of flying, but I'm just thinking about my last flight was not a pleasant one. But I do like planes, and I like the whole you know technical aspects of of the entire process, even airports. But flying with a mask on for however long this flight is going to be, and being in an airport, and I hate wearing a mask. It's just not, flying does not have the same appeal that it did pre-COVID, and it had less appeal pre-COVID to me than it did, you know, a number of years ago. It just becomes a hassle, and also sometimes freaky, like unexpectedly freaky. But I'm excited. I'm not like super afraid of planes or anything, by the way, if that's how that came off. I've flown all over, but did not have the best plane ride my last time, and now it's just gonna suck because I just have to wear a mask for like 7 hours. Whatever. I'm not trying to complain. I am going to the jungle, and I'm gonna find wildlife, and going up to the top of a volcano. I'm stoked. Maui has been a place that I've always wanted to go to. It's a big trip. I mean, we're bringing a camera, and Paulina and I are both photographers, and I will definitely share the photos when I come back. So I'm hoping to get some epic shots. But anyways, like I said, I have stuff to do. Peace, guys. If you, by the way, if you want to participate in the open call tomorrow, it's going to be shorter, but I will have it probably be about 2 hours tomorrow night at 7 p.m. In our Discord. Private message me on Instagram if you want the link. But I will still be there. It's just not going to go 6 hours like it normally does. It's going to go for 2 hours. And then I got to pack. So, all right, guys. Thanks a lot. And I will talk to you tomorrow if you're in the Discord. And if not, I will see you in 2 weeks because I'm not going to be streaming next week. Peace.